No man is an island. English poet John Donne spoke those words, and they've been used and thrown around, and even now people kind of have to say no human is an island because of the political correctness. What does it mean, really? I was thinking about this morning. Not those words so much as, I find that many of us are, we're on this path of awakening. When you're on the path of awakening, you start to see things at a higher level, and you start to remember things, and you start to hear things in a completely different way. So when you look at the universe, your worldview opens up and starts to look different, and you start to see through your heart. You start to really remember your greater being. And often what happens is that many of us, that occurs to us, but the people around us remain more or less the same with their worldviews, even as ours is changing. And this can be incredibly challenging, because it can make you feel very alone. And so some people can make a mistake at that point and think, well, I need to find my people, which is absolutely understandable. And so I need to move away from all these other people who are still asleep. That can be a mistake, because when you are an instrument of awakening, you're needed where there are people who aren't necessarily awakening yet. And even though that can be a great challenge, it's very common, because for your awakening to become consistently, powerful, it needs to not depend on your environment. It needs to be strengthened from within. And there's nothing like being surrounded by those who don't share your worldview to really help you refine and hone and polish that lens. So I say this to encourage people who, whose families perhaps don't awaken or don't understand them, or perhaps even whose friends are very different and hold very different worldviews. That's perfectly normal. And it can even be rather wonderful. I spend a lot of my time surrounded by people who don't share my worldview, and who don't really know anything about Gene Keys, and who don't know anything about this stuff, and who haven't remembered yet. And it doesn't stop you loving them. That's the thing. You can love them without having to impose your worldview on them. You can just be the field so that you're ready. You're always ready to have that conversation if they want to. And if they don't, then you just love them where they're at. And you let them learn through their own suffering, through their own way. Because in time they will come to the same views. In time. Maybe not this life, but they will. So you can take comfort from the fact that you're not alone. No man is an island. No woman is an island. But you may be placed on an island. And on that island, you have a job to do. And obviously, when we look around the world, we see the world, for the most part, does not share our worldview yet. Our expanded, open-hearted, incredibly optimistic worldview. Because when you look at the world headlines, for example, and the world stage, you're not seeing the whole picture. You're seeing a tiny fragment, and that fragment is being endlessly repeated in a negative light. So if you were to see the big picture, if you were to go into the cells of your being and their true memory, that everything is light, that everything is woven of light, that everything is moving from light towards light, through love. If everyone could see that, The world will be different. The world will be different. And yet, at the moment, many people do not see that. And they vehemently defend their worldview and often feel deeply threatened by those who have an idealistic worldview, as they often see it. Idealistic, dreamy, New Age, whatever the term that they use. And often they see people with a worldview like ours as naive. And that also is normal. You know, if you can put yourself in their shoes, that is how they must see our worldview. You know, because they're defending their own. So I would say, be careful about defending yours. Allow it to just permeate the worldviews of others. And the moment that someone gets uncomfortable, just be empathic towards them. Go, you know, you don't have to hide what you feel or who you are, not at all. But start to listen to them and let their worldview just be what it is, and be the example of the great listener, and the one who has great eternal patience. It's taken you many, many lifetimes to be able to start to awaken. So allow others that same grace. In their own time, they'll come to it. In the meantime, love them. Just love them. That in itself will create the field that makes anything possible for them and for you. So, you're not alone. There are many of us, and we are catching fire all across the globe. And soon, in a few hundred years, a few thousand years, this world's going to look so different. And I know you know that.